Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Jeanette. I'll just briefly introduce myself in the respect of what my background is. I now have my own private practice called Equity Educators, and we have there's 5 staff that work with us, 4 practitioners, and my husband does all of our accounting. Previous to that, I think some of you may have attended a workshop with Jan Daly. Jan and I worked together quite a lot. I worked for almost 12 years at Autism SA as a consultant in their school program. So, we had a team of about 20 practitioners that were going out into schools working with kids that were neurodivergent, so autism, ADHD, supporting them and trying to upskill their teachers and get a better understanding on the challenges that neurodivergent kids face in schooling. So we work with children from preschool age right through to year 12, and when I was working for Autism SA, year 12 was the cut-off because it was a school program, but now we're finding that there's a lot more young adults that are going to university, and autism doesn't stop when you finish high school. The challenges that some of those individuals face, I guess, are there, and sometimes they're amplified because they haven't been diagnosed until they're in high school. And so going into uni and wanting to know how to connect with others in uni or plan and organise my time, all of those things, I guess. So hopefully I wanted to just get a bit of understanding, because I have tried to keep it fairly up to date rather than looking at, what autism is. I'm going to briefly cover that at the beginning. So just working through using a scale of, say, 1, 2 and 3, a 3 being that you know a little bit about autism, but you don't know a lot, or about neurodivergence. So we'll cover that, the changing language of autism and ADHD, in some of our slides. So anybody on a 3 where they kind of know a bit about it, but they like to know a bit more? Yeah, that's very brave of you all. That's great. Yeah, absolutely. And a 2 would be that, I don't know if some of you would have already worked with kids in camps. I'm sure some of you, you're all fairly young-looking people. You're probably studying, or you may be even looking at going into the field of something to do with working with youth, OT, speech, all of those sorts of things associated with working in that sort of sector. So number 2, you've been with kids maybe that, yes, yep, great. And number 1 is that you know someone that's neurodivergent. You don't have to put your hand up if you're not comfortable to do so, but you may be neurodivergent or suspect that you are. Phoebe, that works with us, she identifies and wants to go through diagnostics for her own personal journey of understanding herself better. She identifies as inattentive ADHD, and it's on our website, so I'm not disclosing anything personal for her. And lots of people now are, because it's so open in the community and there's a lot more understanding around it, lots of people are going through diagnostics, I guess. So number 1 is that you go to camps all the time, or maybe you work in a OSH, or maybe you work in a school or somewhere where there's lots of kids that are neurodivergent, or you've got family members that are. So is there anyone? Yep, lots. Okay, great, thank you. So it just gives me an idea. I didn't want to bring things down to a level where it's like, well, I've heard all of this before, I don't really need to know this. So this is us, we're Equity Educators. And so this is much like a lot of the kids that we work with, and I don't know, I'm not neurodivergent, but I'm very list orientated, and I like to know what's coming up next, and I like to know, most people when we run full day workshops like to know when morning tea is, lunch is, those sorts of things. So I think that's one of the things that needing to understand with the kids that come on camp as well. And bearing in mind, I don't know how structured the camps are, but so I'm just going to try and introduce some things that could be gradually introduced into camps if they're not already. So I'm not sure if anybody watched the assembly on ABC. It was a documentary series of neurodivergent young adults that want to be journalists, and so they interviewed like Anthony Albanese, Amanda Keller, Delta Goodrum, and so they all had. There was one lady in a wheelchair, so she had a physical disability, and so as part of what we do at each of our trainings is we try to acknowledge that everybody learns in different ways, and I think that's the really important thing. Lots of neurodivergent people like to learn first by observing what's going on, and that could be something like a rope climb or working in a group. You know, some sort of challenge may create a lot of anxiety, so often looking at observing and watching others do something first is a form of participation. So we recognise and acknowledge that everyone learns and engages differently. So during this workshop, feel free to do whatever helps you stay comfortable and participate fully, whether that's fidgeting, standing, taking a break or stepping out. So your well-being is important and your participation in any form is valued. So you'll notice I did bring this along, not with the intention of you guys checking in, but we run lots of workshops with teachers. So how we did this with teachers last week, we had about 120 teachers at one of the schools that we work with. So we just got people, we wanted to show that you could use things as whole class strategies. And for lots of kids that we work with, it's really difficult to associate an emotion to participating in something, or that's creating anxiety and I don't really know how that feels, I just feel really uncomfortable. So we're finding that a lot of kids are identifying with, you know, that their battery is pretty low today. That doesn't mean that their battery's going to stay low all day, but I just thought on camps, we talk about later in some of the slides about the importance of having that check-in for people about where you're at the moment, whether you can participate, whether you can do something alternatively. So we found that, like, we put it out last week and it was pretty much full, and there was a couple of numbers right down here on that their battery was pretty empty. And the reason I use numbers with the teachers was because I just wanted to say, you know, number 80 and number 17, I'm not going to ask them to put their hands up, but I'm just going to say to them, something must have, like maybe you didn't sleep well last night, maybe something happened on your way to the workshop this morning that made you feel this way. Maybe you've just had a really challenging week and you're exhausted. So just acknowledging and validating that people have different energy feelings and are thinking that, because a lot of the kids that we work with will say, people want me to be happy. And so I'll say if I'm happy, even if I'm not feeling happy, because I know people go, oh, that's great that you're happy, when they're not really feeling happy. So I just find that something like this, and you can use this across a day in a camp, and it'd be all the leaders as well. And in these settings, like if it was a classroom, I'd definitely be using the children's name, the teacher's name, the support staff that come into that room. If the principal visits, she checks in. So it's about normalising energy, emotions and feelings really for all of us. So understanding that kids as well sometimes can't associate a feeling with the early warning signs that their body's giving them. They can't pick up on them like most of us may be able to. So this is I didn't want to, there's a lot of changing language around autism, and we'll cover that briefly a little bit later. So it's just a variation in brain development rather than looking at it as a disorder, because it's not a medical model. It's just looking at it as a social model and understanding that it's just a difference. It's not a deficit. There's certain challenges that come from being neurodivergent with sensory sensitivities and maybe some support with social communication. But autistic people experience and understand and interact with the world in particular ways, and it's characterised by difference in social communication and sometimes restricted and repetitive behaviours that people will go through, and strong interests and passions. So the language has definitely changed related to what autism is. I was just speaking to Jeanette before this morning. I think you had someone that talked about different cultural backgrounds, and that obviously is the same for people that identify as being autistic, that some of their families are not really understanding the challenges that their child has. And often with the autism comes a child that is exceptionally bright, so they're gifted academically and they're managing school and they're navigating all of that, and coming from a different cultural background, there may be an expectation of being a high achiever academically, but the social stuff is there's a big gap in between what I'm able to do academically versus the social aspect. And so that puts that child, I guess, at risk of being quite vulnerable in certain situations, risk-taking, following others, to be in a crowd. And things like eye contact, I'm sure you would have covered that with the Aboriginal community maybe this morning, but we still hear quite a lot of it about look at me while I'm talking to you, or we're in a classroom with a teacher and the child will look at them and they go, oh, great eye contact, I love how you looked at me when I was talking to you then. But that child might be really uncomfortable with eye contact. So I think the most important thing is to ask that person. So there's some other ways, obviously literal language. So, and this is very, it's just very generic statement in the respect of every person is different, and every autistic person or neurodivergent person is different as well. So some people don't struggle with eye contact, or they may struggle one day with eye contact and not the next. So I think it's good to understand that although some of the challenges or the things that neurodivergent people experience, they're not all the same. And then I thought I'd just quickly as well, because there's getting so many people now that are getting diagnosed with ADHD, and there's obviously inattentive ADHD, hyperactivity, and that combines impulsivity, and that can be within attention as well, but also that they can have both. They can have inattentive and hyperactive, and then you add a diagnosis of autism on top of that, and you've got complexities there around following through with instructions, risk-taking behaviour, feeling like I'm doing something because the other kids might find it funny, and not really understanding that that's becoming annoying to others. So those sorts of things I'm sure that you see on camp. So this section again, I'll just cover very briefly. You would have heard me using the word autistic, and that was something that I would never ever have used 5 years ago. But the language is changing. When I worked at Autism SA, it changed from autism spectrum disorder to on the spectrum, or a person with autism. So saying a person with autism sounds a little bit like they've got something, they've caught something, but it's about shifting the language and asking the person how they would want to be referred to if they're talking about their diagnosis. So neurodivergent is individuals whose neurological development and functioning are atypical. Neurotypical is just the general population, and neurodiverse, we are all neurodiverse in this room. Everybody is neurodiverse. So neurodivergent or neurodivergence is related to someone that has a diagnosis or identifies as someone with autism or ADHD or Tourette's. So neurodiverse is everybody. and it's no longer a spectrum. So when people say, I'm on the autism spectrum, you think of a linear, like a line of I'm high functioning at one end, which would have been called Asperger's years ago. Asperger's is now not a term that's used. If you got diagnosed prior to 2017 and you were diagnosed with Asperger's, it's still relevant to you, but they stopped diagnosing people in 2017 for Asperger's. So Asperger's is what's perceived as the higher functioning end of the autism spectrum, and then it was like you're low functioning and you're at the other end of the spectrum. So that might be you have an intellectual disability as well as autism. And so now it's more looking at it like a kaleidoscope and saying that people have varying strengths and varying challenges, and that's the same for all of us. So it's not a line, and it's not someone that may have sat down on the low end of the scale, may be brilliant in certain areas. And I guess those stereotypes are now sort of, you know, people think that everybody with autism is like Rain Man or someone like that is able to do incredibly gifted things. And of course they can, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're autistic as well. So I think the important thing is to remember that language holds power, and, you know, it's important to be respectful of those people that you've got on camp and to understand the challenges that they have. And if they're open to talking to you about their diagnosis, then listening and learning, I guess, and understanding difference. So does anyone have any sort of stories about someone that they've come across on camp and they've learnt something they didn't know from that person with autism or ADHD or some other form of disability? No? No? I can tell you that yes, thank you.
Something that's important is, and something that I've come to know across camps, is that each kid is going to be very different.
Yeah.
And so relationships is very important, and so working with each person to understand who they are as a person, and then as a consequence why they prefer to experience things in certain ways is really important, so that we can try to offer that as best as we can, so that every child has a positive experience on camp, one that's not only tailored to kids in general, but tailored to individual children as well, which, I mean, can be hard when you've got a lot of kids, but I think can be really beneficial and has been really beneficial. And I think that's when you really see kids click and enjoy their camp experience, is when you recognise that they're individual, and that by sitting down and having the conversation with them, if they're open and willing, that, yeah, the experience can be improved.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about connection is the key to everything, and I guess your camps would it's very difficult because you've got a short period of time that you're with those kids in general, but there's always, I think it's important that if all of us reflect on somebody in our past that was a teacher or some adult that's influenced or made you feel like you've been heard, they're the people that you remember for the good reasons. I'm sure there's plenty of ones that you can remember for the not so good either. But yeah, exactly. If you've got that capacity and you're not stretched, that's the problem, I think, with classroom teachers. They've got so many kids in their class now that need that individual support. And I often just say, I worked when I was studying at uni to switch out. I was an ESO, and just to switch out with the teacher at times, and just when the kids are in an activity, for me to just swap and supervise the other kids while the teacher actually spends time with that young person, because you need to feel safe and understood. And even if you can just get one person that takes that time, that makes the world of difference to all of us, but especially a child that is struggling to want to do things, and there's always an assumption, not always, but there's sometimes an assumption of, oh, they just pace up and down over there because they're regulating themselves at recess or lunch. And it's like, and I'll say to the teacher, but wouldn't it be better if you allowed them to regulate themselves and then support them with some other kids to engage and play? Because I would say, if you ask that child, do you like pacing up and down at lunchtime? What would you rather be doing? And honestly, sometimes it is like, oh, I've never actually asked them. And it's like, well, if you can ask them and they can communicate, they'll tell you, I want to have friends, but I've asked a group of kids to play and they said no. So that's very literal of going, I've put myself out there one day and asked, they said no, so that means every time I ask other kids to play, they're all going to say the same thing. And so that's where it's very black and white for some people that you know are neurodivergent. It's just like, this is how it is, and I just have to accept it. And so I've worked a lot with a young adult. She's about to turn 16, and she's what they refer to as twice exceptional, because she's autistic, but she's also highly gifted, like her intellect is off the scale, and she's almost missed 2.5 years of schooling due to some things that happened in high school which should never have happened to anybody, and misinterpreting social settings and what was expected from a relationship with somebody when she hadn't even really had friendships with kids in primary school. And so she said to me the other day, why is all the onus on the kid that's already challenged with anxiety and social skills to approach a group of neurotypical people and ask if I can play? Why is that on them? We should be teaching the greater community of children to understand diversity and look at being compassionate and saying that person's on their own. Do they want to be on their own? Maybe we should ask them. So it's, and she said to me as well, autistic kids aren't stupid. We know when we get buddied up with somebody, if they genuinely want to be with me, they'll be my friend. But if I get put with a group of kids, it's just been engineered and they'd rather not play with me. So it's quite complex, but I learn so much from the kids that we work with. And so this is just quickly the change in neuroaffirming language. So non-verbal is now called speaking or non-speaking, or using an augmentative communication device. Selective mute has changed now to situational mutism, so which is from the people that we've come across, families that we've come across, they've gone, oh, thank goodness that's changed, because it's perceived that selective is by choice. I'm making a choice not to talk to you because you're an adult and I'm scared. But it's anxiety, and it's overridden by anxiety. So it depends. A child can be comfortable to talk to their friend that's sitting next to them and whisper in their ear and get them to tell the teacher, but they might not be comfortable talking to adults. So sometimes there's a misconception of them making that choice. So that's situational. And again, we just talked about autistic person. I don't really hear people say normal, which is quite offensive. What's normal? We're all different. And comorbidity is changed to co-occurring. So comorbidity, again, sounds like a very medical model, sounds like you're something that needs to be fixed. But it means co-occurring means I may have autism and ADHD, or I could have autism and Tourette's. So it means that you have maybe two diagnoses that's co-occurring. So can anyone maybe think of situations that you may have seen in camp that, like sensory sensitivities? Because I love the fact that we didn't... Yep, sorry, you...
During worship, the music can get really loud, which can, like sensory, like it can definitely overwhelm some kids.
Yeah, definitely. So the loud music can, and I would imagine, like, if you've got kids that have been engaged in an activity that may be about working in a group with other kids to solve a problem or even play some sort of game, that may take a lot of energy from that person, and therefore their central nervous system is overloaded. So then you get them to transition from a game to lunch, which we perceive as a break, but then there could be some underlying anxiety related to what is to eat, what's the choices, am I going to like it? People are going to watch me eat, and that makes me feel uncomfortable. There's all this noise, do I have to line up? And so the constant observation of what other people are doing is can be so overwhelming that the sensory system just becomes overloaded, and therefore something like someone brushing up against you when you go out to play another game outside can feel like someone's hitting you with a baseball bat, because your central nervous system's so overwhelmed. So, and often, again, this is a generalisation, but often a lot of the kids where we work with, and I can only really refer to schools and home situations because I haven't worked in a camp, but, you know, you'll have kids that the teacher will go, oh, they were fine 1 minute, and the next minute, you know, they're at their locker and they've punched someone next to them, and then they've got into this full-on fight, and it came out of nowhere. And when we look back at what's happened before that, it's moments of transition, it's lessons that they hate going to because it's PE, and, you know, the worst thing that can happen, and I hope this doesn't happen on camp, is where someone says, find yourself a partner or get yourself into a group of 4, or even worse, when I was at school, which was a while ago, they pick a team leader, and I just pick you off one by one, knowing that you're really good at soccer, you can kick the ball really hard, and all of a sudden there's a kid, and it doesn't matter whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, there's a couple of kids that are standing there waiting to be picked. So kids will say to us, it's horrendous. There's just, this is all going through my brain before someone's even picked me. So I think that they're the things that, you know, you can learn through your own experiences, I guess, but when you talk to the kids, what are their preferences? What do you want? How do you want us to work out the teams? You know, because it may be, you know, that you might pick a child that says, well, I can work really well with Fred, so I'm good if I'm with Fred, and then the rest of the group, it doesn't matter because Fred gets me. So it's important for that child, I guess, to have someone that has similar, you know, that they connect, and neurodivergent kids are no different in the respect we all find our tribe, we all find the people that we love to hang out with because they're our kind of people. And most kids that we work with in high school, most of their friends are neurodivergent because they get each other and they can just be themselves. They don't have to mask their anxiety. So much like you were saying, like it's great that the lights went down today, because fluoro lighting for lots of people, especially if you've been sitting or focusing on something, if it's, say you've got board games out or something and the kids are playing board games and there's a bit of anxiety around who's going to win, who's going to lose, taking turns, all of those things, and then the lights are on and they're really bright, I have kids that will say to me that they can hear, they'll say, can you hear that? And I go, what is it? And it's like the crackling of the fluoro lighting. And I'll go, I can't hear that. And it's them, they're hypersensitive to sound because they're overloaded. And it's about advocating for that and being able to say, that makes me feel really uncomfortable. Could we have an alternative? And I was saying to Jeanette before, like I go into some classrooms and like you put something on a desk that is laminated for a child and you get the reflection on the lamination, you can't really read it properly. And it's not that hard to turn off all the overhead lights and have lamps in the corners. And that's what a lot of classrooms are doing now, thankfully, because fluoro lighting is probably one of the worst things, I think, in that respect. And even just simple stuff like asking for a tube, if there's 2 tubes of lighting, ask a maintenance person to just remove one over where that child's sitting. So those sorts of things, I guess. Has anyone seen, I'm sure you would have all seen things with change in plans? What about if it's raining on camp and you've got an activity that was planned outside? How do you deal with that? Is anyone going to be brave enough to? Yep.
I know in our experience we have had that a couple of times over, but we just have to kind of have a group discussion at the start of the day, and oftentimes, like, if we know there are kids that particularly struggle with that, it'll be like we get their small group leader to go and catch them over breakfast and just sit down and be like, hey, have you noticed that the weather's kind of sucky today?
Yeah.
We're not going to get to play capture the flag, but we're going to get to do this instead, and
Yeah.
then maybe tomorrow we'll get a chance, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Kind of just like restructure and re-explain what it will be.
Yeah.
And oftentimes before that day, we will have already explained the plan of the game, and so they've got that whole idea in their head. And now we've only got like this much time to explain a whole new plan to them.
Yes.
So taking that time to like pull them aside in breakfast and kind of check in with like what you were saying before,
Yeah.
how you're feeling, and if it's
Yeah.
not a great day, then you already know before you get started.
Yeah.
We're probably not going to have a great conversation.
Yeah.
But like structuring that conversation to set them up with, well, this is what's going to happen at this time, and if that doesn't work for you, we could do this instead.
Yeah.
Kind of giving them alternatives, because that likely they're not going to love the idea of
Yeah.
having to recalibrate a whole new idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's great. So I think, I don't know, on camps whether you have like access to big whiteboards or things like that. I'm assuming that lots of the places that you go would have. But even just like I use a to-do list with all the kids, whether they can read or not. Like if I work with a 5-year-old in reception, and our checklist, I get them to tick it off as we've finished activities, and they can see and that gives me the flexibility to switch things around. But later on in the slides, it's always good for kids, and I'm not sure whether you get many kids that come to camp that are now, it's called pathological demand avoidance, so it's PDA, but from the neurodivergent community, it's called a pervasive demand for autonomy. So it's about having, pervasive desire for autonomy, not demand, desire. So it means that person wants to do something, and that's a whole nother workshop in itself, but it's an automatic central nervous system shut off. Even if it's something they want to do, their brain won't let them do it. So it's not oppositional defiance disorder, it's pathological demand avoidance. That's the term that's used. So it's not currently on Australian diagnostic, like you can get a diagnosis of autism and ADHD, and now the diagnostic reports are coming through saying presents with a profile of PDA. So that's someone that has a very firm desire to have control over things, and it's not actually their choice, it's their body shutting down, their nervous system shutting down, and they just cannot do it. So I guess something that could help in those situations, if you notice a child that is kind of going, I don't want to do that, you might get things like that sucks and it's boring, and all of this stuff that you kind of think, wow, that they liked that yesterday, but now they don't want to do it today. So it's kind of like looking at a plan B. So it's looking at having a backup plan, and for some kids you need a plan A, a B and a C. And you kind of go, well, a plan B is about going, this is what everyone else is doing. I'm noticing today that you're a bit low on energy. You've told me that you're not feeling great. So we could do the flag game, or this is an alternative. But then don't expect an answer. Don't expect that person to give you a decision, walk away and say, I'll come back a bit later and see what you've decided you want to do. And it might not be anything. It might not be something that they really want to participate in. So obviously social interactions are often challenging, and we've kind of touched on that. Executive functioning is the ability to be able to plan and organise your thoughts, your things. I'm sure you get lots of kids that lose stuff all the time, or they're the ones that you go, where's your hat? Oh, that's right, I left my hat out in, it's back in where my bunk bed is, or something like that. So sometimes with those kids it may be that you've been pre-warned that they lose their stuff. They get really anxious when they're holding everybody up with their hats. So it could be a little checklist that is made up either just on a piece of paper quickly, on a post-it note, before you leave your dorm. these are the things you need to have with you: water bottle, hat, sunscreen, or whatever. So those sorts of things, just to help with planning and organisation. And then emotional regulation. So we'll cover some of those, like we talked about loud cheering, unexpected noises, maybe temperature changes, like all of us. Some people like the cold weather and some people love it when it's hot. But you might notice, has anybody noticed on camp a kid that's got like their hoodie on and it's 35 degrees and everyone else is running around in shirts or singlets? Sometimes it's not about saying to that child, it's hot, like it's a hot day, why are you wearing your hoodie? Because maybe they don't know, and that's where the internal awareness for some people, it's called interoception, so they don't have that awareness that their body's getting hot, that they're hungry, that they're thirsty, that they need to go to the toilet until that very last minute. And then all of a sudden they're ripping their hoodie off and going, oh, it's so hot, and they're angry, and like it's like, whoa, where did that come from? So rather than, like if it's a child with, a firm need to have control over things, I had a child in a school that I was observing, and he had a one-to-one teacher, and he had quite significant behaviours, obviously, if he's got a one-to-one teacher. And we were out in the yard, and it was about 35 degrees, and he was the only kid out in the yard in a hoodie, and he had the hood up. And immediately it's like, oh, there must be sensory sensitivities, and I don't know that boy, and he certainly wasn't in a space to be able to tell me how he was feeling. So I said, what would happen if you went up and pointed out that he had his hoodie on? And she said, oh, it would just go pear-shaped. I'd probably get all expletives at me, and he'd probably kick me. And so I said, well, what about if you go over? Because I said, I don't know him, so I don't have a connection with him. Maybe go over and just say to him, I'm noticing that there's nobody else in the yard with their hoodies on. I'm wondering if they're hot and they've come out just, in their T-shirts. And so she went over and did it, came back, and about 2 minutes later, his hoodie came off. He chucked it on the floor, and she sort of said, oh, he's chucked it away now. And I said, he's taken it off. He's not aware of those internal indicators of heat, and that's why you're seeing behaviours straight after recess and lunch in those moments. So just be aware of that, and sometimes, some people will react okay to being said, oh, you need to take your hoodie off, and others won't. So if you can think of, there's a slide that I've got, and I sent a cheat sheet to Jeanette on declarative language. It's about not being direct with your language. It's about being curious and planting a seed. And once you start using it with kids, you don't just use it with neurodivergent kids. It's like what I said, I'm noticing it's cold today. I'm wondering whether you might need your jumper, and let them make that choice. So as far as your pre-camp familiarisation and stuff, I'm not sure how much is involved in all of that, and maybe you guys are not as involved. Do you get to, is there surveys for the kids or the families? Does Jeanette, maybe you could, or...
We have a registration form where they answer lots of these kind of things, so they let us know if they have any needs or anything that we need to cater for.
Yeah.
And every camp also sends out letters to parents as well, saying these are all the things that kids should bring and the kind of things they can expect to experience on camp and all that kind of thing.
Yeah. So something you might want to consider sort of adding to that, because what a parent's expectation is of their child engaging in something. Sometimes it is, like, I'll be completely upfront, some kids go on camp because the family needs a break. The other siblings need some time with their parents, and sometimes it is a respite thing for them. And the child obviously wants to participate, but there's a lot of back-end stuff done. We do lots with kids that are going away on camps, like lots of them go to Canberra now, and that's huge, like to get on a plane and leave your parents and, to be able to go out for that long. We just had a boy actually that's at one of the private schools, and they send all their boys away to a camp for 5 weeks and they're not allowed technology. One of our workers, Phoebe, she writes. She's been writing letters to him and giving him some strategies, and he's been writing back to her. And it's those sorts of things. So even if you added into maybe some of your camp stuff of what would make the camp easier for you. So it's kind of like giving it, say, could you share this with your child? That child might not want to write it, and parents may get into a bit of a tug of war over that. So it doesn't really matter, even if they're happy for you to record it on a phone and send it to one of the camp leaders. So it's just about getting, obviously within reason, but getting some ideas of what would help that kid, you know, because someone was saying to me, you know, imagine going to something like this, a social sort of setting, and there's all these things that you're challenged with that we all looked at before, the sensory sensitivities and organising, planning, food maybe, you're not really that keen on the camp food. But, you know, imagine having someone that gets them already and says, I read your note and, you know, or I listened to your audio text and, you know, let's work on that together while we're here so that you get the most out of your camp. So looking at maybe a visual schedule. Often we've got kids at schools that, you know, they want to engage in PE, but the challenge that they have is they know, all of us know, when we're good at something and when we're not particularly good at it. And, you know, maybe something like if there's going to be certain games and activities, sending things like YouTube clips to the family and saying, let them watch these games if they haven't played them before. It'll just give them a idea of what that's going to look like. And then they can make an informed decision of how much they want to engage. Do you get any kids that come for tours before camps? Do you know of? Not really. No, because some kids that we work with that are going on school camps will do like a social story for them. We'll try and access photos from the school of what the dormitories look like. This might not be your dormitory, but this is what the dormitories look like. We try and find out some of the food that might be on offer, and we'll put that all into like a social story and say, you know, things may change, like with the weather. So you're putting in that plan B and saying, if it's raining, we'll have some alternative activities, which could be. So it's about those for kids, I guess, that are really struggling. And the other thing that we do as staff, like if we've got a new child that's coming with us, and it might be something that you could do just generally as it's probably more an administrative task, but some of it, and you might already do it actually, but some of it we have our photo. We have our photo and we have a bit about us, one interesting fact about us. And so then the kids go, oh, well, I know what you look like and I know that you've got a dog. And so that's a key connection for us because I like dogs too. So I'm going to come up and go, I read your bio and I've got a dog too. So it's those things that can make the world of difference for someone that struggles with social situations. Yep.
I know some camps on the camp Facebook page put introductions to the leaders.
Yes.
And who will be doing different things.
Yeah.
So that's a really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really good because when we first started out, we just had our website and we've got information about ourselves, but it became evident that the families were saying, oh, I showed my child your photo on the website, and it's like, okay, but the stuff on there is more pitched to adults as well. It's kind of like, this is my background. It's not like I like, you know, hiking, cooking, whatever. It's like you're looking for those kids, they're looking for some sort of connection, and if they've got that connection, it might spark their confidence to be able to say to you, oh, I saw that you like cooking, I love cooking too. And there might be an opportunity there for them to help out with something, in like food preparation wise or things like that. And then checklists on what to pack. Now, I have given Jeanette just a rough checklists what related to some of these things that she can hand out. I can send it through electronically and you can adapt it. But I guess you'd already be doing stuff around allergies and medical things. But again, it's about those profiles, personal profiles of the kids. And also, what are the things that could potentially trigger big emotions for you? So are there any specific things that could trigger things like loud noises? It could be things like lining up for breakfast. For me, it just makes me feel anxious, and then by the time I get there, I'm a bit late for breakfast and I'm worried that there's not going to be anything good to choose. So that could be going, well, we can work it out. We can either save something for you and then you don't have to worry about that. That's there for when you come. And it's not, some families will say, but that's just bending to what they want and you're just allowing them to do what they want. But it's much more involved than that. It's not about making somebody be like everybody else. It's about understanding different people's needs and saying, well, we can work through that with you. We can accommodate it. We already talked about, I guess, Plan B. Do you have like sensory type spaces at camp? Yeah. So they're when, like, is that just like, I know most of them are teenagers. You've got a couple of camps a year which for younger kids. But what about like the teenagers? Is that just an area that's got bean bags or?
We normally make a breakout space like for during worship time, so for the kids who get overstimulated by
Yeah.
the lights or the sound or whatever,
Yeah.
it's just a bit too much at a time. They can kind of just step out. They can still within access. We just have a leader that sits with them or plays board game or different fidget activities like comfy seating, that kind of thing. Just
Yeah.
so that it's nice and quiet, nice and calm.
Yeah.
That they can kind of step out, and then the same with like our dining hall space, which is often buzzing because that's like the main central location.
Yeah.
A separate little room off to the side that's still open enough that they're around, but they can just kind of sit in a quiet, like darker, dimmer lighting sort of environment.
Yeah.
Something, play a game, just chill out.
Yeah.
And just, like always a leader that's involved in that space to kind of have that conversation and that regulation and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Have you come across kids that don't want to eat on camp?
Yep.
Yeah. And how do you manage that though? How do you manage that? Because for me, it's kind of like if I don't eat, I get really grumpy, and most of us do, I think. You get, but as well, like your energy goes down, and we're constantly working with kids on kind of making the analogy between a car. If you don't fuel your car, you're going to run out of petrol, and so looking at that's important. But like a lot of people, when they do get anxious, their tummies get tight, and you don't want to eat. Sorry. Yep.
I think it's related to the routine stuff as well.
Yeah.
Especially with the food, especially those kids who go, I don't want to eat because I don't know what this food is.
Yeah.
Whether they don't know if it's going to be spicy, if it's going to have too much flavour, and they're very used to having a routine of what they like to eat at home.
Yeah.
And so when you say, child doesn't want to eat on camp, I think nearly all of us in the room go,
Yeah.
that child,
Yeah.
we've all had that on a camp before, or we've seen that. But it again, that communication of saying to them, okay, well, if chicken schnitzel is not your thing, that's cool. Is there something else we could find for you and get them? And then that's that ownership conversation.
Yeah.
And quite often, we've taken kids to a kitchen and all they wanted was Vegemite sandwich.
Yeah.
And that's fine because if they're eating,
Yeah.
they
Yes.
and they've owned what they want. So it is making sure, and it's again, like I said, the routine side of it is they're just not used to what we're putting together on camp.
Yeah.
They need to control what's going on. So
Yeah.
making them do that.
Yeah.
And we've, just to add to that, like we've sometimes had a kid where they really struggle with that, like lining up and coming through, and then they can't see what's ahead of them because they're in the line, and that like kind of freaks them out a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we've done it where like we invite that small group or just those few kids to come in 5 minutes earlier. They're still eating at the same sort of time as everyone else, but they got to see it all first.
Yeah.
They get to see the room kind of empty and look around and go, okay, well, I was going to have a hot dog, but don't come near me with the cheese. I really don't want
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
the cheese.
Yeah.
And they get to go through first and kind of pick and make
Yeah,
their own
yeah.
decisions, like in a calmer state.
Yeah.
And oftentimes then they'll make a comfortable decision and be fine with it. Or they'll have that conversation with you of like, actually, do you mind if I just have some roll, but do you have some Vegemite? And
Yeah.
we just pull it out and we sort it out and it's all
Yeah.
good to go.
That's
But
great.
when they're in the line and there's 20 people in front of them and 20 people
Oh.
behind them and they can't see.
Yeah.
But we also like do a lot of deconstructed food on camp. Like personally for us, we have a lot of allergy
Yeah.
But that in doing that, then the kids, if they don't like the texture of something, they don't have to have it. Like
Yeah.
if they love cucumber but hate tomato or
Yeah.
whatever it is, like they can have salad, but they just pick the 2 or 3 vegetables that
That
they
they
actually
like. Yeah.
So
Oh, that's great. If you do get kids, though, sometimes it's quite surprising when we unpack some of the things that can really stress kids. It is actually eating in front of others, and they don't like people to watch them eat. But we've found, like, with that trust and connection with somebody and understanding that and being open to say the real beauty of working with neurodivergent people, and again it's a generalisation, is that they're so honest. They're so honest with things like, this is how that makes me feel, and it's like, well, great, now I know that, you've told me that, that's great. So how about, like I'll say to kids at school, how about you just bring your lunchbox and while we're working you can just eat, and I'll go back to the classroom and the teacher will go, my God, they've emptied it, and they're normally in the class with other kids. They just worry about, I'm going to miss this because everyone else is eating faster, and the whole time I kind of use the analogy of when you go to a function that, because when I worked at Autism SA, they used to put a lot of functions on, and we had a lot of people that were autistic in our office, and they were quite anxious. And I had a conversation with one of the guys that worked there, and he just said, first of all, you come in, and you get like 3 raffle ticket things, Stubbs, to take up to the bar to get your 3 drinks. And he would come back with 3 drinks because they're his drinks and he didn't want to go back again. And it wasn't alcoholic, it was just soft drinks, but he put them down, and then the food would come out and he was worried about how that was going to work. So the whole time in his head, I'm sure we've all been to parties where food's coming out and you can see everyone grabbing it and you're like, oh, there's not going to be any left for me. But he was like, he just grabbed the tray and put the tray on the table near his drinks because he wanted to reassure himself. And then I was standing next to him and there was this conversation going on, and I could see he was getting anxious and he's sort of starting to flap a little bit and tap his leg. And I said to him, I sort of pulled him and I said, are you okay? And he said, I'm not contributing now, I'm not contributing. And I said, but watch everybody else. I said, there's only one person in this group speaking and other people are listening. And I said, if you're not really interested in what's being said, just excuse yourself and go to the bathroom or something. But he was analysing everything about the food, about the drink, about where he was going to sit. It was all of that. And I think we all go to some social functions and you kind of watch people and you go, well, they got a drink, you must go up and get your drinks. And then you're comfortable once you've got your drink, you've got something in your hand. But for him, it was just getting there to start with, what to wear, what were people going to expect me to talk about to them. So it's all those things that some of us take for granted, and it's just like, wow. So we just acknowledge that, it was great that you could come. It was great that you came for an hour. You had something to eat and something to drink and a bit of a chat, and often that would take a real toll on him. A couple of days after, he'd start to feel a bit more like his normal self. And social things like that, where I've got to predict everything, takes a huge amount of energy. So I think that's the important thing. And it sounds like you've already got a good, far better than a lot of people that we come across that, I still meet people out in the community that ask me what I do for a job, and I'll tell them, and they'll go, are there autistic kids in mainstream schools? And I'm like, are you serious? Like, yes, of course there are. You probably work with some people that are autistic or ADHD. Yes, they are out in the community and they're doing amazing things. So never underestimate what someone can do just because of the way their brain's wired. So I think we sort of talked about roughly about some of the things that you can do pre-camp. So if you put 95% of your effort into planning, there's always going to be a variable. If you put 95% in planning, if there is a behaviour or something that goes a bit wobbly, you're only going to have to put 5% of effort into that. If that person is able to regulate and get themselves back down to being, calm and engaging. Whereas in the reverse, if you are reactive to behaviours that you're kind of like, whoa, where did this come from? you'll spend 95% of your energy at the other end. 5% will be all your planning and stuff, and 95% will be reactive, where everyone goes, oh my God, this kid's done a runner and now they're chucking things and they're swearing. I'm sure you've dealt with those things before. And yeah, so I think it's about looking at what do we need to know? What do we need to know that this person needs? What can we implement and put in place so that we don't necessarily see those behaviours that impact not just on that individual, they impact on everybody that's on camp. And have you seen those I'm sure you've seen sorts of behaviours where, and everybody sort of goes, oh, I wasn't anticipating this happening. He seems so calm. He's so articulate. He's all of those things. And it's like, yeah, he's human like all of us, but he's also got a tipping point, and that's probably with all the overload that's been going in, and he hasn't had time to chill out and decompress. And for some people, that, especially after a big meltdown or a big emotion, giving someone time and space, what we perceive is long enough, might not be. So I guess, has anybody re-triggered somebody by, like, as in, they've had a big moment, they appear calm, and then someone's engaged again with them, and then they've re-escalated? Has that happened on camp? Maybe not. Yeah.
We, the camp that I run, have a few kids that have some pretty significant additional needs.
Yeah.
And last year was kind of the year that manifested, and that we kind of first experienced that. So we put a lot of these processes into play last year to, talk to parents beforehand, talk to kids beforehand, make sure they knew what was going on, to give parents kind of the most information that we could to support their kids on camp, and then had their kids come on camp and kind of thought that things didn't go well. We had a situation in particular that we would have never expected to happen on a camp, that had kind of happened at the start of camp and had lasting effects for the rest of camp, and was something that, but because of those behaviours, because we had talked to those parents prior to camp, we were able to call the parents and say, hey, look, this is what we're experiencing. We don't need you to come pick your kid up. It's not behaviour we can't deal with. But, how do you think we could support this kid? And because we'd already had those conversations with parents prior to it, was really easy to have
Yeah.
those conversations again, because there was that relationship. But we kind of came out of that camp anticipating that, particularly that situation, and one of those campers, that we didn't think that went very well. We didn't think that they'd want to come back on camp this year. And then they're now registered for camp again, and instead of last year where their mum provided a lot of medical information for them, it just says, in the box we have where you can provide medical information, it just says, similar to last year, like, please reach out and chat to me. He came on camp last year, he loved it, he's really excited to come back again. And
That's great.
We thought that this situation could have been really damaging, and something that could have potentially impacted his desire to want to be on camp again, to want to be around certain people.
Yeah.
Kind of on the flip side, it kind of the care that we took in that situation and the relationship that we built with those campers through that made them want to come on camp.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's really good. So, yeah, and I think the best thing to do, maybe even with that particular child or young adult, is to actually ask them what they want the adults to do in that situation, because sometimes people will come in really close and try to talk someone down, and they'll just go, like they might say, if I'm having that reaction, give me space, don't talk to me. And those sorts of things are really key. Yep.
More sort of like getting back into what your question was before about re-escalating
Yeah.
the situation. With this camper in particular, the incident occurred, and we sort of acknowledged that if we went straight away and spoke to him then, it would just blow up.
Yeah.
We waited, I don't know, 90 minutes maybe, just for it to settle.
Oh,
Whatever it was.
yeah.
Like, that was just what we said, let's just wait for it to settle down. And then I went and approached the camper,
Yeah.
individually and said, hey, we noticed this,
Yeah.
this incident, etc. But then
He re-escalated.
did not want to talk to me,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And so I just verbally said, well, I need to contact mum and dad about
Yeah.
this sort of thing, just so you know that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
If you want to be a part of that conversation, you can be. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we'll bring you in later. And
Yeah.
it was sort of like multiple points throughout a day where we had to sort of break it up so that it wasn't all at once. But
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way we did it,
Yeah, it sounded like you managed it really well. I think the thing to maybe hold in your head is that there's an escalation scale and it kind of looks like a mountain. And for most neurotypical people, we can have a really bad day, like something goes on at work where you feel like you're going to flip your lid and you've kind of walked out and gone, and you've gone home and maybe got grumpy with your family as a result, and then we go to bed and we can de-escalate. We might go back to work the next day and still feel a bit niggly about what's gone on, but for someone that's neurodivergent, it can take up to 3-4 days of before, if someone wants to address an incident of what's occurred and why did this happen, you're likely to get a respike, because then, and because, again, a generalisation, but lots of neurodivergent kids we work with have a really strong sense of social justice, and it's like, but they did this, and you know, like, it's like you can see both sides. So we kind of work a lot on perspective taking and understanding different people's viewpoints, and it's okay that they have that viewpoint. This is your perspective, and we all have, you know, different ideas. But yeah, just being mindful that sometimes reintroducing something or even showing compassion and care and saying to someone, I noticed that, you know, that was a really big reaction from you. It must have upset you. Do you know why it did that? Can, again, like, it's like, well, I don't want to talk about it. So it might be about going, well, we'll let it settle. We need to go through these steps. But maybe tomorrow, while we're playing a game of Uno or something, because it's always, you know, something, my hands are busy. I find with the kids, they can build a whole Lego build. If Lego's their thing, they'll be sitting doing Lego and I'll get so much more. And the parents go, how did you get them to talk that much? And it's like, first of all, it is connection, obviously, but then that's something they love doing. Let them do what they love and we can chat, and it just becomes a two-way situation. It doesn't become me lecturing them or telling them what I think they should do. It's about me trying to get them to understand other people's perspective on it, and maybe not trying to shift theirs in the sense of, but that's how I react, you know. But we're saying to a lot of parents now, you know, if your kids are reacting that way, when they're young adults, and if they're acting physically towards others, they're going to get into big trouble. They're the kids that will end up in the, you know, criminal justice system, unfortunately, because they need to understand that there are rules and boundaries that apply in life in general. So, well, it sounds like you're all on the ball with things like sensory considerations, and again, it may be kids that have things that they need. I'm sure that lots of kids come with their noise cancelling earphones and those sorts of things. And I guess with those kids that may have difficulty, lots of kids wear the loops now, and they come in these tiny little boxes, and then that becomes an issue because they don't know where they are. So maybe having checklists, their own individual checklist, and if they haven't come with one, then sit down and make one with them, because if they lose one of their earbuds, it will be not that they've lost it, that someone else has stolen my earbuds. So looking at it and trying to make them responsible for their own things, and building that independence. Because like all parents, we all do things for our kids and we think we're doing the right thing, but what you're actually doing is you're not teaching them. You're not teaching them the value of being independent and having, you know, looking after your own things. So I would imagine that you've got things like, maps for the camps. And for some of the new kids that have never been on camps before, those sorts of things, just photographs and social stories. If you need any of that sort of stuff, just email me. We've got heaps of templates. We do so many for kids on camps, and it just helps the families have something, and you can put it all into like a little folder that they bring with them that's got their list of things that they've packed in their bags, and then mum and dad might say to them, remember on the last day of camp, you check your list and make sure everything goes back in your bag that you brought with you. So it's about building those strategies for adulthood as well. And you're doing all of this, so you're doing staff education, and you've all given up your Saturday to come along. And I was saying to Jeanette how amazing it is that all you guys come and you do the camps and connect with the kids, and you do it all voluntary. So that's, it's incredible. So just being around like declarative language, and that you'll find the cheat sheet that I sent through electronically to Jeanette, it's actually got, instead of saying this, use this instead. So a quick example is a girl that I work with that has a diagnosis of autism, ADHD and a PDA profile. She was, I've been working with her at school for a while, and everything in the school environment was going well, and the parents decided that it would be a good idea to put her in little athletics in the morning. First thing is, she didn't know really. She knew that it was running, but she didn't know what it involved. So she turned up at 7:30 in the morning, which is early for her to be up, let alone dressed and ready to exercise. And she didn't participate for the first 2 weeks. And so the co-curricular person contacted me and said, I'm wondering if we can meet and chat about it. And I gave her the cheat sheet, and I told her how I work with this girl, because as I said to Jeanette, we learn all the time. We're still learning about things, and everybody's different that you work with. So I know that at the end of my session, she would want to use my iPad. And so I'd have my iPad, but I'd notice with her, as soon as I'd say to her, oh, the girls are going to chapel, her body would turn, and she's blocking me already with the iPad. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a battle. And so I changed my language when I bought this declarative language book. And I said to her, I'm noticing the other girls are lining up. I'm wondering if they're getting ready for chapel. And literally, I wouldn't have to say to her, you've got 2 minutes on the iPad, 1 more minute, like pre-warn her. My alarm on my phone would go off, and she just pass the iPad and get up and go, because I wasn't putting a demand upon her. So I sent the sheet through, because honestly, if you just think about it, I use it quite regularly, and once you start using it regularly, you'll notice you use it with everyone. So you start it's about curiosity and that as well. So Jeanette's got that to give to you guys. So you've already talked about the difficulty with transition. Emotional regulation, you can use a check-in, and I find like we try for whole class approaches on token systems work really well, and I would imagine they would work really well on camps. We have a big container that's got a hole in the top, and we use these gemstones. When we work with kids that are transitioning to high school, the container is not clear. We establish with them how many tokens they think they can earn as a collective group for participating and asking questions and things like that. So we set some goals, and then they get to put their tokens in. And if they earn 20 tokens in a session, they get to go through this lucky dip. But they'll decide, and they want to challenge themselves. They'll go, I reckon we can earn 30. And so those things work really well, and they may work well on camps around things like, cleaning up after, giving those people that maybe struggle with doing things around camp, giving them specific things that they may be comfortable doing. Because I know one of my students cannot put her hands in water and wash dishes, but she's happy to dry up. So that even on the questionnaire, it could be to the kids, what would make camp easier? Tell me some activities tell me some chores that you might be happy to do. And things that you definitely, and usually the things they definitely don't want to do usually involves the toilets, which you can't blame them, but it's usually around sensory stuff, whether it's tactile stuff or whether it's auditory or the sense of smell. So just looking at, there's lots you can use around these sorts of check-ins, and we just had this blown up. And we didn't want to pay a huge amount because we're just using it for training purposes. So it cost $15 to make it from Officeworks, and it's kind of like it's just got Velcro on it. So these are the sort of things that will help kids to be like, oh, people are getting me.
Can I add something in there?
Yeah.
You said before about timing, and I know that for us, like we've done a lot with this. Like we have a timetable everywhere, all over camp,
Yeah.
every spare window. But like when you're running an activity, or especially like in elective times or game times, like kids often are competitive and like they get into it. And if you then just stop the game and they weren't expecting that, that's when I feel like we can notice a flare up, and that's when you're talking about those transition times. And now the sensory of like I can't regulate my temperature and I can't do this,
Yeah.
I can't do that. So like trying to make a concerted effort of like we have 15 more minutes, guys. Like
Yeah.
15 more minutes.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of setting these expectations of like we are winding down, we
Yeah.
are packing up, like,
Yeah.
we're getting ready. Instead of it just being like they're finally in the groove because it's probably taken them 35
Yeah.
minutes to get into it. And then
Yeah.
they get into it, and then you're like, okay, pack it up, and they can get riled over that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like setting those expectations of like they can probably read the timetable and know that they're going to finish the game at 4:30, but they haven't actually clocked that because they probably don't have a phone and they're not checking the clock.
No.
And then for you to kind of cut them off,
Yeah.
and they're finally probably feeling socially invested.
Yeah.
It can
Absolutely.
really, like ruin the whole activity
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah.
So like I guess that conscious effort, like as the leader, like wear a watch or know the time and be setting up expectations and knowing that kid really needs to know that they've only got 5 more minutes.
Yeah,
whatever it is,
definitely.
And
And-
following through with that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think as well that what you've got to sort of assume is that if you just do it with all the kids, it will help, and you just get into that routine of going, well, we need a 15-minute countdown, whether it's something, even if they're not engaged in it. But the problem, I think, with lots of kids, especially with ADHD as well, they get that hyper focus where everything else gets blocked out, and it's like you're talking and you might give an instruction to a group and you think that they've heard you, and then everyone starts to get up and move and they're like, what's going on? No one told me. And it's like sometimes it's just about sort of going, oh, you know, I hope everyone's listening up. Fred, this is about you too, you know. So not trying to single someone out, but going, you actually need to listen to this instruction because you're going to miss it. Or even just saying to them quietly on the side at dinner or something, going, I notice that sometimes you get so involved in things that you miss that instruction. How could I help you not to? So, you know, though, yeah, so it's great. It sounds like you guys are on the ball. So I think if you can get that consistency, that's where you're going to get more kids coming forward and going, you know what, I'm neurodivergent and my parents haven't told you that I am. But that doesn't mean, like this girl that I work with, she holds herself together and she says that the quiet ones are the ones that get missed because it's the people with the big behaviours, especially in a school setting, which is understandable. So it's just be aware of those quiet ones that might slip under the radar, that might be anxious. And, you know, the parents might report back after the camp and say, oh, they came home and they said it was good, but they were worried the whole time and no one, like their perception was no one gave them any attention. And they're the kids that potentially need more support than the ones that, you know, get it because of their behaviour. So this is the curiosity-led language, and I don't think we tend to get a lot of power struggles sometimes with schools, and sadly we still hear, we try to talk to teachers and they just say, I'm teaching, I've taught for 20, 30 years and I'm not changing my teaching for one kid. And it's like, well, there's not one kid, there's a lot of kids that would benefit, and they're not all just neurodivergent kids. If you use some of the strategies, it's everybody. There's kids in that room that are flying under the radar because there are kids with big behaviours. And so buddy systems, I guess, can work. Again, they have to be, there has to be some connection with the other kids. As the young girl said to me, you know, they're not silly enough to know that those have been engineered. So things about preempting, I guess, what can we do if this happens, if it's raining tomorrow? You know, you might see on your weather thing that, and all you guys already know, and you're changing it on the schedule, but that kid could be so focused on the kids in their dormitory that are making noise and whether they're going to get any sleep tonight, that they're missing the change on the schedule. So it's about pulling that child, much like you said, pulling them aside and going, what are we going to do tomorrow if it's raining? We've got a plan B. So just flexible participation, allowing for kids to opt out and opt in, maybe watch for a while. Lots of kids that I work with will opt out sometimes, and families will go, why aren't they doing cross country? They did it last year. And I'm like, yeah, because it's hard and they probably don't want to run it. but wouldn't it be better if they walked it, or wouldn't it be better if they were able to be a timekeeper or help someone set up for the cross country? So watching, doing, helping, maybe doing some filming. And we've talked about transitions and timetabling, I guess, of using countdowns. You use that perfectly. First and then doesn't tend to work for kids with PDA profiles. It can actually make the situation a lot more rigid and difficult to manage. So just being mindful of going, we've got, you know, this happening next. I'm wondering if this is an option for you. I'll let you think about it, rather than going, you can do this. It's either this or this, because that works for some kids, but it doesn't tend to work for kids with a PDA profile. And just being mindful that those kids sometimes are holding themselves together all day, and you can start to see that they're getting a bit wobbly because you've spent a day with them and you can see those indicators. It might be about just going, I'm noticing that you haven't taken a break today. It'd be a good idea to just go chill out for a while. And we've talked, I think, about all of that, respecting processing time, a check-in, maybe discreetly if they're overwhelmed, they can pick somebody that they're comfortable. I think it's about looking at the safe people, places and things that they're happy to do, and looking at those things to sort of engage them. And then after the camp, I guess you guys need the opportunity to debrief and pat yourself on the back for all the good things that have happened, and look at some of those things that is just human nature. Something will happen, undoubtedly. And, you know, but again, if all that pre-planning goes in, you'll have to put a lot less effort into the camps, because you'll see that the kids will be more regulated, more engaged, and you'll probably see less of the behaviour that you may have seen on the last camp. You can offer the kids some debriefing times, or I don't know if you send surveys out, but if they're teenagers as well, getting their voice into, you know, some people just naturally can be negative about things and others are not. You know, they'll may be honest about things that didn't work for them. And again, maybe lots of the younger kids that we work with, they'll get home and they'll get grilled by their family. What did you do? And all of those things. And I have this most Monday mornings with some of the little kids that we work with that have to do recount writing. And I don't like writing, it's really hard. But then I've got to pull back on all my working memory and I don't remember what I did. And so I just get the parents to send through photos of things that they've done on the weekend and cut them out. Let's glue them in sequence. You tell me and I'll write for you. So it's like, and it just becomes a stronger connection with that person that way. And most of those kids end up either recording, if writing is challenging for them, they're doing it independently within a term if you just differentiate the way things look. So I think we've talked about ADHD and autism. Their needs can overlap in areas, but I'm just going to move ahead now to the end because it's almost... And I think you guys seem to have a very good understanding of, you wouldn't be volunteering your time if you weren't passionate about kids. Yeah, and so that is amazing. And so just inclusive peer engagement, I guess. So they're proactive, safe, supportive. You've got all those structures in place. And I guess that every camper deserves to thrive is important. And this is just about a quick summary. I can send this through to Jeanette if she likes. Just looking at, sometimes we see the surface, we only see the behaviour and we don't see all those things that are underneath that are challenging for kids with trauma backgrounds, their sensory needs, may not be able to understand feelings and emotions in themselves, and definitely can't understand feelings and body language, facial expressions, all of those things, lack of... So I'm just going to play this, and this has actually got one of my colleague ex-colleagues on it. It's just a nice way to...
My productivity would skyrocket.
Oops.
Working days would shorten.
If the world was built for me, there would be nothing wrong with me. I would be happy, safe, and certain, and successful.
If the world were built for me, when I met people, there would be no expectation of physical contact or small talk. We may ignore each other with a socially acceptable nod, or throw ourselves into a deep and meaningful conversation.
If the world was built for me, then we would all sit next to each other, not opposite. Things would be based on literal words, not guessed expressions and gestures.
If the world were built for me, there would be a compulsory day off for everyone after any social event, just so we could take the time to recharge and process things.
If the world were built for me, work would be about working and nothing else. There wouldn't be the necessary interaction that goes with it. My productivity would skyrocket. Working days would shorten. Free time would be shared.
If the world were built for me, you would ask me why I'm constantly fiddling with a piece of whatever it is I need that day. And I'll tell you with a smile. You would chuckle and accept it. I'd like you more.
If the world were built for me, their noise-cancelling headphones would be handed out in crowded places. Trains would be bigger, people would be banned from touching people they don't know without permission. I don't mean criminalised. We have that. It doesn't work. I mean magically banned.
If the world were built for me, I could touch and revel and find joy in textures that please me. And I could hide and keep away from those that fill me with pain and revulsion.
If the world were built for me, you wouldn't ask me how your clothes look unless you want my honest opinion.
If the world was built for me, then there would be an airlock between the home and the real world, a buffer zone for daily approaches, and arm length. If the world were built for me, any invitation would come with a detailed plan of where, and when, and how. I would be able to construct a plan and a map with a little extra effort from me. I would know what was happening.
If the world were built for me, people would let me know if plans needed to change. They would message me and minimise the pain in my head as I grind my gears to adjust.
If the world were built for me, family gatherings would keep me safe. Touching, hugging, kissing would all be on my terms. Talk would not make me feel alien and alone. It would be safe and kind and loved.
If the world were built for me, real rules would be explicit. Fake rules would come with an explanation. I wouldn't find myself following rules that everyone else knows aren't real.
But the world isn't built for me.
The world wasn't built for me.
The world isn't built for me.
It's built for people who like those things or can cope with them, or don't like them but don't mind, or don't like them and can say they don't like them, for reasons that are valid in the world of everyone else.
The world isn't built for me, so as the person with the brain that isn't the norm, I have to find a way to fit in.
I sometimes wonder if you would like my world, with its gentle structure and routine, its beauty and its simplicity, its honesty and its truth, its patterns.
I sometimes wonder if I'd miss your world if it went away. As exhausting and as painful as it can be, like cold, blunt metal, all rigid and hard to lean on, it has its charms. It has its moments, it has its joys.
If the world were built for me, I would make sure the world could be built for you too.
Okay, does anyone have any questions just before we finish up for your lunch? No, because it was lovely to get some engagement, and obviously you're used to having quite a lot of neurodivergent youth that come on your camps, which is amazing. I think the better we get as a society with lots of different things. We were talking to Jeanette before and saying, you know, there's lots of, I think there's 2 or 3 Foodlands now that have sensory shopping times where they dim the lighting and they play very soft music in there. For people that have sensory sensitivities, we saw, went to the Fringe and saw that lots of them now are putting chill out spaces for adults and kids that you know, get overwhelmed in those situations, want to participate and go to those things like everybody else does, but it's sometimes a bit overwhelming, and to be able to maintain their ability to be able to engage, they just need to chill out for a while and block out the rest of the world, I guess. So yeah, we're seeing things shift very slowly in a positive direction, I think, and so you'll end up getting lots more kids, I hope, because it sounds like you're doing an amazing job accommodating them. And I think, you know, we all learn from each other, and with some little tweaks and things that are changing along the way, yeah, hopefully the camps will run smoothly and you'll get a lot more engagement. So thank you. Thank you for your time. It's been lovely to present to you. I hope you've come away with something from it today. So yeah, we just like to, we always put, you know, bringing your energy to the space, and I think a lot of the kids that we work with are very intuitive on picking up on people's energy. So I think the first thing to help a child that is dysregulated is for you to stay calm, and even though you might be panicking on the inside, it's just like if you can regulate yourself and your own emotions, that child will co-regulate with you if you're a safe person. And it may not be that they want to be completely left alone. They may be telling you to F off or whatever they're saying to you and get away from me. But going over the other side of a room, if they're in a room and they've withdrawn themselves, or even outside, just going, I'm just going to go sit over there and I'm here when you need me. And you'll find it may take, like you said, I think 90 minutes or more for that boy. You might find that you're outside, but if you were to get up and go away, if you've already got a connection with that child, I think you'd find that would create more anxiety. That even, you know, it's just about you anchoring yourself so that they know that you're there. So I think that's probably a key thing too, because we all panic when we see those behaviours. I've done it myself. I've been involved with a boy that smashed windows, locked himself into a church. We were at a little Catholic school, and he's probably the most complex boy I'd ever worked with, and he had two massive, the school went into lockdown twice during my sessions. So none of us know everything, and I learned on that day what not to do. And so they're the things that you take away as the teachable moments for you, because the kids will teach you so much more about understanding, compassion, care, and everybody's different. So I think that's the key thing to take away, because often those kids are misjudged, and doesn't sound like it is in this space, which is wonderful. So yeah, so enjoy your camps, and I hope they all go well, and it's been lovely coming out to present to you. So thank you.